From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report. Automobile makers present their newest designs at car shows around the world. Many designers hope to create the vehicle of the future. Some of these new technologies could be seen recently at a car show in Geneva, Switzerland. A popular device among car makers is autopilot. Autopilot enables a car to drive itself without human control. Rinspeed is a Swiss design company. It demonstrated an autopiloted vehicle. The car is based on the Tesla Model S, an electric-powered automobile made in the United States. The Rinspeed car includes a large television and an espresso coffee maker. Frank Rinderknecht is head of Rinspeed. He says he does not want to sit and watch the steering wheel turn as he rides in a car with autopilot. He instead wants to read, watch TV, and feel calm. One of the most interesting ideas presented at the car show was an automobile built with a 3D printer. The German engineering firm ADAG designed the car called Genesis. The body of the vehicle is printed in one piece from thermoplastic. ADAG says its design for Genesis was based on a turtle shell. The company says the design provides the right amount of strength and firmness. Other automakers did not look so far into the future. Czech automaker Škoda presented its Vision C model vehicle. The car runs on environmentally friendly natural gas. Škoda says the Vision C could be on the market in 2 years. Another manufacturer, Volvo, presented what it called its estate concept car. All its controls can be operated by voice or a large touchscreen. Experts say the vehicle is almost ready for sale to the public. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. New research shows that getting wealthier does not always make a nation healthier. Subbu Subramanian is a professor at the Harvard School of Public Health in Massachusetts. He says many people believe that economic growth is the best way to improve child health in developing countries. But he says that is not always true. Take India, for example. A common measure of a country's economic health is gross domestic product, or GDP. India's GDP has been growing by more than 5% a year. That is a higher growth rate than most Western countries. Yet, more than 2/5 of Indian children are underweight. And Subbu Subramanian says the percentage of underweight children has changed little since the 1990s. He and other researchers asked a question. Was economic growth failing to reach children in other countries? They looked at health surveys carried out since 1990 in 36 low and middle income countries. The researchers compared the effect of GDP growth and signs of child malnutrition, but they found only a small link. The group reported their findings in the journal Lancet Global Health. Subbu Subramanian says money should be spent on clean water, child immunization campaigns, and other programs. The head of the Institute of Development Studies, Lawrence Haddad, disagrees. He says malnutrition has dropped sharply over the past 20 years in countries like Vietnam, Ghana, or Brazil. Lawrence Haddad says economic growth was responsible for half of those declines. He says it takes both GDP growth and the right investments to improve child nutrition. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman. From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. The international community is warning of a possible famine in South Sudan if the fighting there does not end. Leaders of East African countries met recently in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa. They discussed ways to stop the fighting in the world's newest nation. South Sudan's government and rebel forces agreed in January to end the fighting, but it has not stopped. There has been little progress in peace talks, which are also being held in Addis Ababa. U.S. Special Diplomat Donald Booth spoke during the meeting of the East African Intergovernmental Authority on Development. Members of IGAD are leading the peace talks. Mr. Booth said he is deeply unhappy that neither group is respecting the ceasefire. The rainy season will come to South Sudan in just a few weeks, but many fields remain unplanted because people have fled their homes. They are afraid of attack if they return. It is estimated that 85% of families in South Sudan are farmers who depend on animals and agriculture to live. Alexander Rondos is the European Union's special diplomat to the Horn of Africa. He said officials must act quickly or there will be a famine in South Sudan. Government soldiers loyal to President Salva Kiir and those who support his former vice president, Riek Machar, began fighting in December. Tens of thousands of people have been killed. The United Nations says more than 700,000 people have been displaced. The UN says more than 200,000 of them have fled to neighboring countries, including Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, and Sudan. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman. From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report. The social media service Twitter is doing very well in the South African capital of Johannesburg. The city leads Africa in Twitter usage. A new study shows that Johannesburg averages one tweet every 13 seconds. The public relations company Portland Communications carried out the study called How Africa Tweets. It gathered information about geotagged tweets from October to December of 2013. A geotag records position information of a tweet. The study shows that over 600,000 geotagged tweets were posted during the 3 months. Alan Kamau leads the Nairobi office for Portland Communications. He says it is no surprise that Johannesburg leads Africa in Twitter use. South Africa has the highest smartphone usage of any country in Africa. Mr. Kamau says geotagged tweets do not represent the total number of tweets from each city, but he says they do provide a dependable estimate of Twitter usage. The company did its first Twitter study in 2012. Mr. Kamau says the largest change he has seen is in how Twitter is being used. He says consumers are now using Twitter to discuss faulty products or bad service. Mr. Kamau says companies, organizations, and even sports teams now value Twitter as a great resource for social involvement. The leading topic of Twitter across Africa is football, a sport known in the U.S. as soccer. Mickey Modesene is the public relations director for the Orlando Pirates. He says the team's Twitter account has 145,000 followers. He says he is excited about his team's Twitter popularity. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Thousands of young people in Senegal attend and live at religious schools called daras. These schools accept only boys. The students are called talibé, and they study the Quran. Some daras force students to ask strangers on the street for money and food. The government had promised to stop this forced begging by 2015. But the organization Human Rights Watch says there has been little progress. Recently, a government study found that more than 30,000 students were begging in Dakar, the capital. The boys were reported to be as young as 4 years old. They are often walking the streets shoeless and in torn old clothes. Matt Wells is a West African researcher for Human Rights Watch. He says the boys must bring back a required amount of money, sugar, and rice or face punishment. He says teachers will often severely beat talibé who fail to meet the demand. He also says the boys usually are hungry, live in dirty, overcrowded rooms, and receive very little real education. In March 2013, 8 talibé died in a fire in Dakar. Neighbors said they knew the children could not escape from the school building in which they were living. After the fire, Senegalese officials promised to take steps against child begging. But Human Rights Watch says the government has closed only one dara for safety reasons. HRW says there are hundreds more that violate students' rights. Senegal's Ministry of Justice says it knows of the problems and is working on new legislation. But a ministry official notes there is cultural resistance to laws restricting religion. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. Are you a saver or a spender? A penny saved is a penny earned. This old saying calls attention to the wisdom of saving money. Putting money away for a rainy day is another recognized saying. In the United States, people who want to start a savings account have several choices. These include banks and credit unions. Credit unions are cooperatives for people who have some kind of connection. For example, the members might work for a university or a government agency. Most credit unions are nonprofit organizations. Credit unions, banks, and other financial organizations pay interest on savings accounts, but the interest rates are generally low. Certificates of deposit, or CDs, pay higher returns. With a CD, a person agrees not to withdraw the money for a certain period of time. This term could be anywhere from a few months to several years. Longer terms and larger amounts pay higher interest. But early withdrawal means CD holders must pay a penalty. Another way to save is through a money market fund. This is a kind of mutual fund. Mutual funds invest money from many people. Money market funds, however, may not be federally guaranteed like other kinds of savings. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation guarantees savings up to $250,000. In a number of countries, people have been saving less over the years. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development is a group of 34 countries. The OECD says Americans saved about 4.5% of their household income last year, down from 6% 4 years ago. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Help Report. New research in India shows that children eat better when their mothers have more power, more education, and are able to move about freely in their communities. Researchers found that women who joined a job skills training program felt more in control at home and in their families. And the children of these women ate more rice and dairy foods. A program in southern India is called Mahila Samakya. It brings women together to form local support groups. Researchers at the University of Illinois questioned if and how these groups affected the women's sense of themselves and their positions in the family. Kathy Bayless is an economist at the College of Agricultural, Consumer, and Environmental Sciences at the University of Illinois. She led the study. Ms. Bayless says that before joining the peer groups, the women knew fewer than 5 other women. to whom they were not related. Ms. Bayless adds that many of them did not know the possibilities for women in work and in family life. Experts say 40% of Indian children under the age of 5 suffer from underfeeding. But Ms. Bayless says involvement in the support groups led them to provide better foods for their children. Researchers visited the homes of those involved in the groups. They created a simple measuring process. They brought different sized food bowls and asked the mothers which size bowls they were using. Researchers confirmed that the children were eating better based on the size of bowl the mothers used. They found that girls especially started eating more. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Health Report. Schizophrenia is a long-term and often disabling brain disorder. People with schizophrenia suffer a break in the links among their thoughts, feelings, and behavior. They may hear voices that other people do not. Schizophrenics often withdraw from reality, from family and friends. This means they may not seek help for the disorder. The main treatment for schizophrenia is medication, but sufferers may forget to take their medicine. Now, research suggests that community-based in-home care is an effective method for treating people with schizophrenia. The study involved almost 300 schizophrenic patients in India. All the patients were between 16 and 60 years old. Researchers looked at community care for these men and women in their homes. Then, the researchers compared it to the care received at mental health centers. Study leader Graham Thornycroft is with the Institute of Psychiatry at King's College in London. He says healthcare workers visited the homes of 187 schizophrenic patients. The workers gave the patients medication and follow-up care between doctor visits. They taught family members how to care for their loved ones. The in-home care was combined with visits to mental health centers. The progress of this group was compared to 95 patients who received care only at mental health centers. Mr. Thornycroft says that a year later, the patients who received in-home care showed major improvements. He said they were more connected to the real world, had fewer problems, and were more likely to take their medicine. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization says Africa has more food security problems than any other continent. Representatives of more than 50 countries gathered in Tunisia in March for the FAO's 28th yearly meeting on Africa. The conference ended with a renewed promise of support for food security and continuing development. The FAO says Africa has enjoyed strong economic growth in recent years, but it says the continent continues to suffer from low agricultural productivity, low pay in rural areas, and high rates of malnutrition. But it says conditions in some areas have improved, partly because of increased production of basic crops. The UN agency says farmers are growing better kinds of bananas in Eastern and Central Africa. It says farmers are planting maize that produces more crops. Farmers are also growing more cotton, teas, and flowers. But the FAO warns all of that is not enough for the growing population. The FAO says agricultural production in African countries has risen less than 1% a year compared to 2% in other developing countries. Bukhar Tijani is the agency's Assistant Director General. He says the FAO wants to increase investment in small farms, many of which are controlled by women. And he wants to get more people interested in farming. Mr. Tijani says young people must understand that farming is big business, not just a tradition. He says the FAO and its members should help African countries create a dependable, solid agricultural system. He says this means young people must become farmers. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. The organization that administers a widely used college entrance test called the SAT will change the examination in 2016. The not-for-profit College Board announced that it no longer will test students on rarely used words. Students also will not be required to provide a written work called an essay. And the new SAT will include passages from American historical documents or from writings on issues like freedom and human rights. The SAT is one of two major tests for entrance to American colleges and universities. The other test is called the ACT. Test scores help colleges decide if a candidate can succeed at their schools. More than 2 million students take the SAT yearly. They include about 100,000 foreign students. Nigerian student Peace Umoru is in her first year at Howard University in Washington, D.C. Ms. Umoru says she thinks the new tests will be easier because of the removal of rarely used words. She says that is the hardest part for international students. The College Board says words on the new test will relate to usage. Students will be asked to identify the meaning of words based on the way they are used in reading passages. Eddie West is with the National Association for College Admission Counseling. He says the new tests will better predict a student's performance in college. But Mr. West says the addition of material related to American historical documents could make the test harder for international students. But the College Board says it is now working with a free online educational service. Khan Academy will provide preparation material linked to the newly designed SAT. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.